everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Mobilecast, and we're coming to you again with another edition from Bryform, and I have the pleasure of sitting down here with Dave Stafford. He is from VMware and works in the end-user computing section, but we're really here not to talk about VMware and just talk some ideas and some real interesting stuff that Dave's talked about at Bryform and a couple other times on Twitter and the Internet. So, Dave, introduce yourself.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. So again, David Stafford. I'm a 19-year veteran of the end-user computing space. I've spent a lot of my years actually in IT, managed IT desktop and mobility while I was at Cisco Systems in their internal IT group, worked on a few different projects, and somehow I ended up where I am today, just having a blast over at VMware. But thanks for having me.
So, Dave, you did a great session last year about FUIT and some of the ways that users actually go around IT. Can't get out of the proxy server, so figure out the port, and then you tell everybody else, like in the Prel commercial, this person tells two people, and they each tell two people.
There you go.
We've both seen people bring in wireless access points, and although it's becoming easier to detect them and all.
Right.
And, you actually did a great presentation this year. And, my favorite slide, and part of what I want to spend some time talking about today is you think that one of the biggest problems coming up in mobility and computing and enterprises is really the data ingestion problem.
Exactly.
And, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the data ingestion problem is and, then maybe we'll see what we can do about it.
Perfect. No, I think you hit it just spot on, right? A year ago, we were really talking about the whole FUIT trend where people were bucking IT policies and controls simply for the purpose of getting their work done. It wasn't that they really had it in for IT, but rather they found it too constrictive, and so they took matters into their own hands through a variety of somewhat nefarious means, and that was what I had a lot of fun talking about, being that I worked at a very technical organization at Cisco.
And to be fair, it's and let's emphasize it. It's not that people are trying to be nefarious. It's more a question of I turn on my computer between the antivirus, between the firewall, the proxy server, all this other stuff that's happening. I can't get my work done.
Exactly. It became a burden, right? We always talked about take a look down next to the clock. Lower right-hand corner, and you immediately see it, right? You got the software inventory agent, the antivirus agent, the disk encryption agent, the two-factor authentication agents, the RSA tokens, et cetera. Just, it got to be maddening. And so that's really what we kind of evolved, the discussion towards this year. And when we look at all of the different applications and all of the different tools that are now available to us in a consumer context, what we find is that people are needing to turn less and less to the IT applications that are provided by their employer. And what that is leading to, in my opinion, is this data ingestion problem. And it's simply that I am ready to say that almost all work, when it comes to the knowledge worker use case, that all work is created outside of the bounds of corporate IT controls, where it used to be created on the laptop that IT issued, or that it was captured within an IT application that was able to have the focus be on leakage. That's not where content creation is.
You had your home drive. So, you were on a laptop, you had your home drive. When you hit save, that's where it automatically defaulted to.
Right.
They were network drives that were backed up. Your data was always inside.
Right.
And, I think what you're pointing out is twofold. It's okay, first of all, how do I do this on mobile devices when I start looking at tablets, phones, and laptops that aren't in the perimeter? And then there's the other piece of, and I talk about this a lot, the crapplication.
Yes.
IT gives you, a crappy app, and you say, if I go to the store, I can get Evernote, I can get some of these other things where I can take notes, save them, do other stuff with that. But now we have, as an enterprise in IT, we don't have the data anymore. The
Exactly.
data exists on the iPad, the phone, whatever it happens to be.
There you go, right? So one of the conversations here this week was around defining data. And I think Dropbox was the original one where you mentioned home drive. Dropbox is my home drive today. That's where I store my file data. Now, one of the things that, for instance, Jack Madden has pointed out is the inextricable data. And the inextricable data could be the information captured in an Evernote, right? There is no file type, per se, of Evernote. There is no file type of a Google Doc. These are the systems that are now the source of record for new corporate information being captured. And these then natively and by design are also becoming new points for collaboration. And when people start collaborating outside of IT, now what we've got is not only the original idea being captured in Evernote or the evolution of very, very detailed documents and analysis in spreadsheets on Google Docs. This is now the problem that IT needs to say, it's great that all of this data is out here, but what on earth can we do from an IT perspective to convince people to bring it back inside the enterprise where we can start to put enterprise controls around it?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to people are trying to work together, people are trying to collaborate, and we have SharePoint, we have other things, and they're not hard, but they're not always easy, and depending on what you're trying to do. So you may go to Evernote, you may go to some of these other great tools. I mean, I can tell you that there are people, I've seen people at work who sometimes don't use the Conference Bridge and the WebEx because there are all these other new tools out there to do that sort of thing that, hey, I didn't get it, but this is free. And, free and freemium is, an interesting way when it works better than what you have.
Totally agree, right? There's just too many examples. The team that I worked on, we originally were on Skype. Now we just predominantly use Google Hangouts because it's a one-click and we're into a collaboration session. Another area that we are constantly seeing is, people go into a meeting room, they whiteboard out an idea, and they exchange different thoughts on a whiteboard where they're collaborating in real time. But what do you do before you leave the meeting room?
Take a picture.
You take a picture. And where does the picture go?
It's on your mobile phone. It's on your photo roll. You may email it out.
Exactly.
Or you may text it. You decide how. And they have boards that you can put USB keys in and everything else, but it's a lot more expensive when all I have to do is take a picture. And the other thing I've seen people walk into conference rooms with projectors, hook up their iPad and use Adobe Ideas to start sketching on it as a whiteboard and then just save that as the document and mail it out or whatever else.
And there's two things these are the very simple, obvious things that I see to illustrate this. If you were to have your employment terminated, the question I pose to anybody is, what would you lose? And if you don't believe that this is a problem, go ahead, play it out. The layoff notice comes down, the pink slip comes through, your badge quits working. Seriously, is the iPhone backup of your contacts there for you to be able to continue to communicate and get in touch with the people that you worked with? Did all of your data magically disappear, or do you already have backups of it somewhere else? What I'm really, really tired of is the idea that, many people in the audience in some of my sessions have said, it's really up to IT to provide better tools than what's in the consumer space. And I don't think there's not a fighting chance of an IT department in the world to try to outpace the development and the user experience that goes along with what we have in the consumer world.
I think that when there is a good consumer option, I would agree with you, it's very tough. I think when you're improving processes and creating your own app, that's a little bit different. But, I think that part of what we're going to see in the next little bit is the apps that want to play in the enterprise and that are really getting traction are going to start having some enterprise features there as table stakes.
Exactly. I mean, Evernote is a great example, right? Time and time again, we poll the room around how many people are here using Evernote, how many people here are supposed to be using Evernote. The same thing can be said for the Dropbox and the Box.nets.
And to be clear, when we say table stakes, Evernote's added a password if you want it. Evernote's added some enterprise management features. Box kind of started off in the enterprise space. Dropbox started off with just plain Dropbox, then TeamSpace, and now it actually has some enterprise features that it's putting in there. I think you're going to see a lot more apps that have that. I also think what will become interesting is a lot of these freemium apps and free apps and pieces that we start to use a lot were built quickly. And they weren't, we don't necessarily question our own privacy. So we don't know where that data is, how it's being stored. And I think that if they start building for the enterprise, they're also going to meet the needs of the individual user who, all of a sudden cares, well, can the NSA, look at my data? Where is it? What's it do? How's this work? And that sort of stuff. And I do think we'll see that. That doesn't necessarily solve the enterprise problem.
Right.
But
yeah, and so I think there's two parts. One is going to be that we're going to see applications evolve more to provide enterprise controls and enterprise just show that they recognize the enterprise use case. What I want to tell the person that's trying to think about what they can do to entice their users, it isn't just about providing an equal or, in most times, an inferior functionality, but I really want people to start thinking about what are some of the business enhancement capabilities that you can deliver new business value to where people are going to want to turn over their data in order to put it into a collaborative context with their coworkers, with their peers, to encourage them to upload and to share that information that they may have captured outside.
Yeah, we were in a session yesterday with Brian Madden who said, talked about a concept that I both think we kind of liked, although I'm not sure how we would do it, about, bribing your users to actually store data with you, and, as part of the bribe, maybe we pay for your iPad, but you have to give us the data. But even then, though, the issue is how do we funnel that data? Because we can't say give us the data by, just put it here. It's not so easy. We actually have to develop solutions and look at solutions out there that, when people are looking at apps and find apps, it's how do you get that data out of that app?
Exactly. And those are some of the ideas that people have thrown at us this week, right? We heard Brian Madden suggest, bribing people with an iPad to turn over local admin rights to lock it down. And this morning we heard Noah Wasmer say that, what I would paraphrase from that was that if we get our hooks in sooner, we'll have a greater opportunity of control. And that could mean that, again, by buying an iPad, that we've effectively thwarted the user's, ability to go around IT, but rather that's the carrot. The carrot is we'll provide you a modern device or a stipend, et cetera. In exchange, you will allow us to have greater hooks into what happens there. I think the jury is still out on where that would be effective and how that could be implemented. Yeah,
so, in a lot of ways what we're talking about is mobile information management, because how do we manage our corporate information when you create it on your iPad, your Android, your Windows phone? How do you actually, that's still my information. You're working for me. I own that. How do I get that in and take care of that? I think what becomes interesting, and maybe the term that you need to use when you talk about this data ingestion issue, is it's not necessarily information or file type, but in reality it's content. How
Yes.
do we get our content? And, part of it is actually speaking the language and getting people to realize there's a problem in the first place.
Right, and I couldn't agree more. The term content, I can roll this one back, 7 years in my career. One of the things that we watched as content, it is certainly not files alone anymore, right? Originally, when I started to use content, I wanted to distinguish Word documents and Excel files from real-time forms of content, videos, videos in terms of real-time video communications. There's all of these different forms and media types that represent content. And some of them are streaming, some of them are static, some of them are inextricably linked to a web application. And really the arrows that we're concerned about, in my opinion, they've changed. It used to be the arrow drawn of data escaping the enterprise, and this is where we really need to figure out better how we're going to bring the data into the enterprise.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the nice things we saw yesterday in Brian and Gabe's session was when they were talking about the perimeter and how to handle, how do we handle people in the perimeter, and we give people really two different experiences. If you're on site, if your laptop you plug in, if you're home you VPN in, you have an iPad, it's different when you're coming in on 3G, or if you have Wi-Fi at work versus Wi-Fi at home. That may be actually three different ways to hook in.
Right.
And, their big thing is get rid of the perimeter. Doesn't matter whether you're at work or home, build your apps and your services to actually interact with what's on the device. And, that actually has a big piece to do with, data ingestion and all, because really all your devices become your own.
Exactly.
Regardless of who owns them.
I mean, this was a term that Cisco coined several years ago, was borderless networks, right? The whole concept of a borderless network was erasing that hard perimeter. And, one of the remarks made was around, as we become more interdependent on multiple external cloud services. This was one of the points out of my talk, was evolving IT skill sets, where this is no longer about building, a crunchy shell and putting up, very well-defined boundaries, but really how are we going to better map the interrelation between multiple cloud services. That can play on the identity side, and that's, one of the things I talked about was around the need to skill up on SAML, another around OAuth, and the idea that object-level permissions are going to be granted between many of these different services. So maybe not all of your Evernote needs to be granted back to the enterprise, but maybe you have a business workbook.
Yeah, that's a great comment because, for example, there are a couple personal things I keep in Evernote because it's the right place for me to keep them. And, I kind of let structure as a reminder service sometimes, or some individual thoughts like when I'm doing a podcast, or the like, which is different from every time I walk into a work meeting, I throw up Evernote and I start taking notes. So, it becomes interesting. I think identity, we actually had Paul Madsen on here, a few months ago, and, we were trying to get to the basics between Paul and Bill Pelletier about, OAuth, SAML, and identity. And I think identity just has a huge piece to play in here. Today it's ACLs and, access rights and how you do it, and how we start doing that in the future when we're talking about these types of devices, and especially with single sign-on, becomes real interesting.
Again, this is one of those things where one of the areas that I'm amused when we start talking about identity is the perception that some have that identity is a context switch, that you are toggling between identities. And one of the things that I think is important to recognize is that persona and identities are concurrent in people's lives. One of my hobbies is I'm one of those Christmas light freaks. I have a Christmas light display of about 35,000 Christmas lights. And if somebody wants to come and talk to me about Christmas lights right this very moment, I am every bit as much someone that would be interested in the topic of Christmas lights as I would be talking about end-user computing, talking about desktop virtualization, talking about data ingestion problems. People's persona are concurrent, their interests are concurrent, and being able to carefully subdivide these into clean buckets to avoid pollution or leakage between one persona or one aspect of our identity and another is something that I think is eroding pretty quickly.
I sent actually a tweet out probably 2 weeks ago where pretty much what I said was, there is no such thing as dual persona. You have a work life and a home life, but let's be fair, in this day and age, they blend. So what you do, at work versus home, your Christmas light example is a great one. For me, I have this mobility life, the podcast, the blogs, but, I play soccer.
Yes.
And, I'm an EPL fan, Barclays Premier League. And so, on a Saturday morning, if you watch me tweet, it's a good time to mute me because, for me, I'm talking about Manchester United. I'm watching the other games. And at work, there are people at work who, stop in my office and we'll have a 10-minute conversation about, the game this weekend or whatever else. And it doesn't mean we don't get our work done. It's still the same persona, and we don't think in dual personas.
Completely agree. Right. So, in fact, what you just said, that was an example of one of the hallway conversations this week was specifically how to mute Manchester United tweets from Brian Katz because, while we appreciate 85% of the things that you have to say, that's one that we're fine to omit. It is. It's one of those things that I really am just tired of the of this concept that it's just a clean line and that we can shut down one half of our being in order to work outside the normal context of
Well, I think that's
time
part,
of day even.
That's part of what mobility brings to, when we talk about mobility, we're talking about we want to enable people to be flexible and agile so they can be more productive and efficient. And we want them to be able, flexible and agile means do their work when they need to do it, but where they need to be and where they need to. Work is no longer a place you go. It's what you do. It's your job,
right.
And so when you start looking at it, it's why cell signal is so important in a building. We did. It's funny. We're having these conversations. We're kind of tying back together a bunch of podcasts. We did one with, I did one with Art King about 2 months ago, where we talked about in-building wireless and small cell Wi-Fi and why it was important, solely for the fact that I come to work now, and if there's an emergency, I expect my cell phone to ring. I may be in 6 meetings a day, whatever else, and I may turn my cell phone off, but for my wife and my kids, you need me, I expect you to be able to reach me.
Absolutely.
And, so it's definitely, I certainly think it's definitely a single persona. You may have aspects to it, but, it then becomes, how do we solve this data ingestion problem? And identity, I think, adds to the issue, doesn't subtract from it.
Correct. And this is kind of where I'm of the opinion that if we agree that we are a single persona and we agree that all content that we create happens within an individual's user, their personal space. That was actually the topic this morning on the Today Show was, a person's personal space. To be
clear, Dave, I'm getting scared now. I was okay with Christmas lights, but you watched the Today Show?
And I'm talking about personal space. We're good. So
to be clear, he's sitting on the other side of the table. He has lots of personal space.
Right. No, we're not cuddling. To be clear, so if all content is created within someone's personal space, and what we are now trying to do is we're now trying to create the linkages of what I have done that has a work context. Once we establish work context, what I want to do is now I want to get that information back in. Most likely is for the collaboration of peers and colleagues. And it's going to be up to me as an individual to determine what content is appropriate to be shared, what appropriate information that I'm consuming can be shared, outside of my work bounds. But those are not going to be defined by firewalls, by virtual appliances, by certificates. Those are going to be defined by people's choices and actions over what they're able to cross over. We can apply this exact same model to so many other things that we've already done. I've heard one person talk about corporate issued briefcases. I've heard another one talk about engineering notebooks from the 80s, where all notes were needed to be taken in the corporate pen and paper pad, so that when they left, they had to turn over their engineering notebooks. I think that this is just one of those things that it is no longer about needing to have a corporate-issued device, a corporate-issued notebook, a corporate-issued anything. Back in college, what happens if you missed a lecture? If you missed a lecture, you exchange notes with someone else that was present in the class, and that was how you got caught up, even if you were present.
You mean when you purposely slept through the lecture because you were out the night before partying?
No one ever takes an 8 a.m. class on a Friday. Thursday nights are rough. But just the whole idea that even if you were present in the class, you're still exchanging notes and you're still comparing that. And that's exactly what we're now doing in an enterprise collaborative sense.
I think it's what we hope to be doing. And, I don't think we're completely there yet. It's one of the issues I have with dual personas, virtualization, some of these other solutions for mobile of, you may be able to install any application in there, and it may be owned by the enterprise, but if the enterprise can't get at that data, if it, instead of Evernote, you get SimpleNote, which has no enterprise hooks into it. Okay, great. I can keep my data separate from my personal data, but you don't have a way to get it.
Sure.
And so it becomes. I'll say I don't know what the magic bullet is to this, but I do know that part of it is, as with anything mobile, when we talk about enablement, it's making it frictionless and transparent. How do I it's okay if I have to figure out where to put data, but it should be easy. So it's second nature of, okay, just touch this once, the data flies off, I'm done. I didn't really have to think about it and say, okay, which one's my home drive again? Which one's work? Which one's my right Dropbox or box or whatever else it happens to be?
Yeah. Now, one of the ideas that I've had that I'm this is one of those half-baked ideas, I'll admit, is simply around auditing. And the whole idea, if I was to be terminated, or if I was to be terminating an employee, and IT was able to help me assess my risk, it isn't necessarily about telling me what information I think that person may or may have created on their local device. But I do think it'd be very interesting at an audit level to be able to say the person that is being examined right now, they have had access to source code. They have had access to these customer accounts. Here is the history of the last 90 days, right? Because inevitably, if someone is going to leave the company and they start dumping their PSTs, they start dumping their contact list out of Salesforce.com or doing mass exports of the LDAP in order to get everyone's cell phone number before they exit the company.
If you can't tell, Dave has had some background in this stuff. Before VMware, he was at Cisco. He had to deal with a bunch of this stuff, and when people were leaving, also he's very familiar with the tools to do this. Maybe VMware should be careful with you, but that's just me.
No. This is
we're joking, though.
This is all just intuitively obvious things that people don't want to admit. I spoke on a series one time called the Evil Insider, and the threat of someone maliciously trying to extract data from an organization, is way more concerning than the casual iPad left in the TSA tray at the airport. Somebody grabs my iPad, chances are they just want to wipe the thing and start over and get their music on it, probably more than they're interested in my Bare Naked Ladies music collection.
I wasn't sure when I heard the word bare naked come out of you where you were going with that, but I'm glad you went there.
B&L, Canadian band out of Toronto. I'm a massive fan.
So I'm happy you went there, and but again, this points to the fact that the user isn't trying to be nefarious. They're not trying to steal data. They don't want to lose their iPad any more than you want them to lose it. They're not trying to use apps that purposely go around the enterprise. They're just trying to get their work done.
Yeah, it's just, we always hear about the reports of the lost laptop, and we all have gotten the letters from our vendors saying that, a security breach has occurred and social security numbers may have been leaked in the free year of Identity Guard whatever. One of the things I just think would be extremely helpful is people love personalized content. They love being able to, know a little bit or learn a little bit more about the information that they have, whether it's analytics, et cetera. So putting that back and being able to say, just, Brian, we'd like to thank you for years of service. We're letting you go. By the way, we are aware that you have had access to the following bits of material. We are expecting that has all been turned in et cetera. But if nothing else, just a reminder to you that if you're going to a competitor, if you are, really upset at your boss, just a final warning on your way out the door. We know that you've had access to all of this, and should any of this become, material information in a data leak or competitive nature, we'll hold you responsible for that content. I really think that there's a certain benefit of having that level of auditing to remind our users and remind, our management as well, what level of exposure they've given to.
It's an interesting concept, and it makes sense to me in a lot of ways, but also, in some ways, I don't know how you do it. I know you're on a project. I don't know what you've produced. If you're using let's not say, if you're using Simple Note, some of these other tools, I don't know what you've produced. I don't know what you actually have, and that's kind of where, it makes sense. I just don't know how you handle it in those situations.
No, and this is one where there's still more questions than answers, which is why I think, the topics that we start discussing this year, what I love about BRI Forum and the community aspect of the industry is I just want to get this dialogue started. I want people smarter than me to be able to come back and offer ways that they have been able to encourage people to bring data back into the enterprise. We've heard, a couple of suggestions already, which might mean that I get my employer to pay for my iPad Mini Retina if all goes well.
Oh, let's be fair here. You're going to find a way to get them to pay for it anyway.
Well, for testing purposes or.
It's amazing how many IT people need a lot of devices for testing purposes.
Testing.
Regardless of what their job is, which is always a fun way to look at it. Was that your session? No, I think it was a different session that somebody asked about that, or maybe it was yours.
I polled the audience several times around how many people, got an iPhone for testing purposes and then turned right around and got an iPad for testing purposes. It's gadget lovers like me, there's no better place in the industry to be.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up here, but I got to ask you, 35,000 Christmas lights? How long does it take to put up, and what's your display look like?
Sure. So you can actually go down YouTube, and on YouTube you can search for Highcroft Lights. Highcroft Lights will bring you up to just a sample of some of my display of last year. But I've gone now from a static display to a music choreographed display, and I've gone from 25,000 this year. I'm going up to 35,000 lights. I'm going to actually start.
Does it take you all year to plan this?
I am in the process of it's called sequencing when you set the songs to music. So I am in the process of sequencing right now some of the songs for this year's display, and it's a really, really fun thing. I had a seventh grader last year that would come over with a lawn chair and a thermos of hot cocoa, and we'd just camp out and watch the light display for 15 or 20 minutes, and gives me an outlet for a lot of my interests. I was on tech crew back in my high school days and loved lighting, and now I'm a computer dweeb. So
look, we're all
ties it all together.
We're all geeks at heart, but it's an interesting hobby. I wouldn't mind a little Hanukkah Harry in the corner of your display, I'm
open and welcoming to all. If I can make a menorah dance, I am all for it.
So very cool. So for those of you that missed it, you go say it again. You go where?
Highcroft Lights on YouTube, and you'll see my intro and one of my songs where I lit up 1,800 channels on an LED Christmas tree with 1,800 LEDs of varying colors.
And where'd the name Highcroft come from?
It's the name of my neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
In North Carolina is Highcroft. So
now, are you the only one in that neighborhood who really does this, or you have
I'm the only sequenced one in the neighborhood, but no, there's some great people. There's a gentleman from IBM. He has actually secondary service from the power company pulled in.
Wow.
Shout out to my good friend Denny Cole. Denny Cole is all incandescent, but my entire display is all LED. And so it comes in at 13 amps, which is less than a vacuum cleaner.
Very nice.
So anybody listening, please go out, enjoy it, favorite it, and I'll keep you updated as the 2013 display progresses.
So this was an absolutely fun conversation. These are the type of Mobilecast that I love because, quite honestly, it's really a conversation. We're having fun. Topics tend to range. And today was really interesting because I thought when you brought up data ingestion, it was a great point. So first, Dave, I want to thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Where can people find you?
Hey, I'm pretty accessible. Best and easiest way for everyone. Twitter at DStafford, STAFFORD. So at DStafford. We'd love to keep the.
Do you have a blog as well, or no?
I'm between blogs. We'll say that.
Okay.
Had a GoDaddy mishap.
So we will put that up in the show notes so everybody can find it, and and to be fair, we'll have Dave send us the links, and we'll put in the lighting links as well.
There we go.
So you can go straight to them as opposed to having to search because we like to make life easy.
That's what it's all about.
But thanks for being on the show, and thank you, listeners. This has been a great show again. You have comments or suggestions, please tweet them to us at the Mobilecast or hit the website. And, we're always looking for things that you're interested in. So, again, until next episode.